Testing, testing. Hello. We are going to try to finish up this chapter using video. I've never done this before, so this will be my first attempt. But if it works well, I think we'll do it a little more often. This way you can watch the notes at home and listen to me ramble about stuff. Pause it when you need to. Rewind it when you need to. Write down what you need to. This way you'll have them. That way in class we can do a little bit more discussion. And we can focus a little bit more about the activity that we're working on. So bear with me. It's my first attempt at this. Hopefully they'll progress throughout the year, and we'll see how this goes. So we finished today. All right. So anyways, I don't know where I was. I just got interrupted, but I'm just going to continue on to where we're at. So we're talking about prayer in school a little bit. We're talking about the First Amendment. We're talking about establishing religion, the Establishment Clause. You cannot establish a religion or any form of it upon people in a public situation. And that goes along with our First Amendment. So to wrap up the prayer in school stuff, there's a couple cases you should definitely be familiar with. I got the textbook right in front of me. I'm just going to kind of ease us through this one. Where were we here? You're going to be looking at about 102. Told you guys we're probably going to do a little bit of a vocabulary test on this one. But on 102, you have Engel versus Vitale. This is the 62 Supreme Court case. This held that state officials violated state law when they wrote a prayer to be recited by New York school children. So the state of New York, this goes back to last chapter, federalism. What control does the federal government have over the state governments? If you remember the Supremacy Clause, if you remember even just a couple slides ago, the 14th Amendment that nationalized the Bill of Rights, that takes this power out of the states and gives it to the federal government. So here we have a case where the state technically is violating the First Amendment by not forcing, but they wrote a school prayer, told the kids they had to say it. We're talking about little kids here. Essentially, you're establishing religion. So in this case, the state officials decided that it was a violation of the Establishment Clause. And then same thing with Pennsylvania here. We have state-required Bible reading in schools. This also violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. So keep in mind the big highlights here. We have two cases that are setting a precedent of that Establishment Clause. Before the 14th Amendment, there would be no issue here. States could do what they wanted to, even if it didn't necessarily fall directly in line with the Bill of Rights. But in this case, after the 14th Amendment, we do have a nationalization of the first 10 amendments, which includes Amendment number 1, may not establish religion. Okay? We good on that? You got that? Excellent. All right, so moving along here, just know that those cases are, precedent setting. We have a majority vote, creationism debate, Christmas trees. What am I talking about here? Let's see. Okay, so regarding these terms, majority vote, we talked about how in this country we found a way democratically to not always side with the majority in this country. There's plenty of cities and towns and states in the South or in other highly religious areas that if you held a open vote and said, should we be allowed to teach prayer or hold prayer or teach about God in whatever shape, way, or form in our schools, people would vote yes. So majority rule, shouldn't we give them that opportunity? Well, no. We oftentimes give the minority some power, and this is a great instance where a couple people can feel that their rights are violated, and those people can have policy made or overturned with the backing of that Constitution. So things like Christmas trees in perhaps an airport or in a courtroom or in a downtown city hall, things like that. People have complained that might be a symbol of Christmas, Christ, Jesus, and is not in line with our freedom of religion. It establishes some kind of religion by putting that symbolic ornament in a public area. So the creationism debate is one of my favorites. I love this debate. You guys are high school students. You sit in class, you go to science class, and you learn about the origins of the world, people. Where did it all come from? How did it start? What are we? Blah, blah, blah. Generally, from my understanding, and I haven't taken a science class since high school, but I was taught, and I believe you're taught, about evolution, and you're taught about the theory of evolution, that we believe that, a single-celled organism or something like that eventually led to what we have today. I'm not going to get into the details because I don't know them. But my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, we can talk about this in class, is that the word creationism does not come up in your science class. What is creationism? Creationism is the mindset that we as human beings were created by a higher being, a God, or God. The argument states that the world we live in is so complex and so technical, even scientifically, the amount of oxygen in the air, all of our elements, the distance between us and the sun, all these little intricacies of our body are so complex that there's no way that we could be a random mutation of an atom or whatever the theories state. So I read a book once by, I can't remember the philosopher, but his argument was well, I'll look it up. Hold on. Okay, got it. William Paley, an English theologian. This guy's intelligent design was his argument. His argument is that, for example, if you were stranded on a desert island, and you came across an island that no human being had ever stepped foot on, or we could assume that, and you found a watch on the ground, and you took it apart, and you looked inside this thing, you would automatically assume that somehow, some way, a human or a watchmaker, somebody at some point left this watch here. To look at this watch and to assume that by natural forces it somehow came together with all these little pieces of metal and intricacies and batteries and ticking to actually keep time, that to be some kind of random accident over millions of years would be impossible. It's just too complicated for that to have happened. So his argument, Paley's argument, is that the watch is too complicated, just like our bodies are too complicated. The world we live in is too complicated. And there's so many teeny little minute details that if they were changed, human life wouldn't even exist. So his argument's going to be that we had to be created by God. There had to be a master plan, a designer who laid out the world that we live in. And that's the design theory. Now, the question that many people ask regarding to freedom of religion and things like that is, why don't we teach this in schools? Why isn't there a chapter in your science textbook that says, and another theory about the creation of humans is that there was an intelligent designer and we were created by some form of God. And you can do that without naming a God, without citing a specific religion, but it doesn't come up. And a lot of Americans think it should. And actually Gallup, the main polling company who invented polling back in the 20s, recently, last year, I believe it was 2012, did a poll asking Americans about creationism. Time out. I'm going to get the perfect details on that. Okay, like I said, this is my first cut here, so I'm enjoying the opportunity to pause this and start over, but it's going to give me an opportunity to give you guys the best data. So I'm looking at the web right now, so I don't know what my eye contact is doing here, but the question Gallup asked was, which of the following statements came closest to your views on the origin and development of human beings? And they asked, humans evolved with God guiding, humans evolved, but God had no part in the process, just a natural evolution. And then the third was, God created humans in our present form, creationism. Most of the people polled, 46% of Americans believe God created humans in their present form. 32% of Americans believe that humans evolved with God guiding them, or guiding that evolution. And only 15% of Americans believe that God created humans, or God created humans in the present form. All right, the last one was that humans evolved, but God had no part in the process. So 15% of Americans believe that humans evolved, but God had no part in the process. So 46 plus 15 is what? 61%. Percent of Americans believe that God had some part in this. Let's see. They even have some, education-based arguments here. But regardless, my point here being is that a lot of Americans believe that there might have been some kind of creationism going on. So whether or not we can explain it perfectly, I don't see why it shouldn't come up in schools. And a lot of Americans don't either. You don't have to teach it as fact. You teach it as theory. You teach it as this is what some people think happened. This is what other people think happened. These are the arguments of both sides. And present it like that. So that goes back to freedom of religion. There was a time period in this country where we only taught creationism. Now we only teach evolution. So whatever your opinion is on that, in regards to this chapter, it's about civil liberties. It's about having the freedom to practice your own religion. Not only can the government not push you in a certain direction, it shouldn't also hold you back from heading a certain direction, if that makes sense. So anyways, we're going to move on from this, and we'll speed it up a little. Sorry, I really like that creationism debate. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit in class, now that we're not taking up so much time with notes. All right, so freedom of expression. This goes on to freedom of speech. We call that freedom of expression. Can we say whatever we wish whenever we wish? Obviously not. You remember this from 10th grade. We can't say what we want whenever we want. We do have the freedom of speech, but within reason. Jewish gangsters. So in our textbook, we talk a little bit about some court cases that kind of set this up. Let's see if I can grab this one real quick without... yes, without pausing it. Okay, so a landmark case involving prior restraint in Neer versus Minnesota. This is 1931, so less than 100 years ago. So a newspaper editor called local officials a string of names. He called them grafters. He called them, I don't know what that means. Jewish gangsters was the term he used. The state closed down his business, but the Supreme Court ordered that the paper reopen. The newspaper editor or anyone else could later be punished for violating a law or someone's rights after publication. So the fact that the state closed down the business because of the terminology that the paper was using, the federal government looked in and said, hey, hold up, that's not, you can't do that. This is freedom of expression, freedom of the press. They deserve the opportunity to do whatever they want as a periodical or as a newspaper. So that decision kind of upheld the precedent of freedom of expression. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit here. What can the newspapers do and cannot do? Prior restraint. Some Z's there. I was trying to be funny. The government's actions that prevent material from being punished. Censorship. You should know what this means. Prior restraint is definitely a term you need to be familiar with. Can the government prevent things from being published? Let's see. The technical term in your textbook says this is a common method of limiting the press in some nations. It's usually unconstitutional in the U.S. according to the First Amendment and confirmed by this Neer versus Minnesota case. I mean, in less free countries, the first thing to go is freedom of the press. If you start to censor the information that's getting out to people, you as a government can do a lot more stuff to take people's freedoms away. So in a country where we claim to be free, it's extremely important to maintain freedom of the press. And I know a lot of us high school kids or younger adults get kind of caught up in these conspiracy theories and these, this Illuminati weird stuff. But me personally, I think our press is so free that we as Americans, we know what's going on. If we want to know what's going on, it's out there. We have access to it. There are reporters, all walks of life, covering everything. In today's day and age with social media, a president, a congressman, a potential candidate, these people, we know everything they're doing, everything they're eating, everywhere they're going, everything they're saying. So I really find it hard to believe that our government could pull the wool over our eyes in any aspect, especially bigger picture things. So that's where I stand on that one. But that goes back to freedom of expression. I think as a country we've done a great job protecting it. You need to know that prior restraint is the opposite of that. That's when the government, prior to what you're putting out there, prior to what you're publicizing, is censoring it and making sure that it's appropriate. And we have these discussions even in schools. We don't have a school paper here at West High. We did it a couple times, but I would imagine that someone would want to see that prior to it being publicized. That's prior restraint. In the government, we currently protect that through freedom of expression. We don't allow the government to look at anything before it's publicized. Okay, enough about that. Neer versus Minnesota. So this is 1931 case protecting newspapers from prior restraint. Same kind of thing. The newspapers can't be messed with by the government. You'll take a look at that on your own. Paper business is shutting down. Okay, I guess I already talked about all that, so there's those notes. But I've really covered that pretty much. Let's see. Hit the wrong thing. Oh, school newspapers. Look at that. I'm already ahead of the game. So school newspapers, technically, yeah. I mean, there's going to be prior restraint in a school. I told you guys you don't really have the civil liberties that you have in the real world here in a school. Sorry, but that's just the way it is. The Supreme Court has verified that. You can't do things here at West High School that you normally could do outside of this building. The rules are different, and that's for the safety of everyone in the building and the fact that most of you are minors. Some of you are just turning 18, but for the most part, this is a building full of underage people. So when you turn 18, you graduate, you walk out of here, you're gonna see a whole different civil liberties world. But right now, sorry. Free speech. Can you urge someone not to join the draft? 18-year-old males, hopefully you know what the draft is. When you turn 18, you have to register for the draft. It does not mean you're actually signing up for the military. You're not putting yourself out there or registering to actually fight. You're just putting yourself on a list. So if the government needed you to fight in a war, they know where to find you and collect you, I guess. But this hasn't happened since Vietnam. I don't see it happening anytime soon, and that's much because we have enough Americans that are willing to voluntarily join the military. I hope some of you guys are willing to do that yourselves, so the rest of us civilians don't have to against our will. So if you got drafted and you openly used your freedom of expression or your freedom of speech, and you walked up and down the streets of the west side of Columbus with signs saying, don't join the draft, no war for oil, or whatever they're chanting these days, then is that cool? Is that allowed? Is that within your constitutional free speech? What do you think? Yes, no? Schenck versus United States. 1919 decision upholding the conviction of a socialist urging men to dodge the World War I draft. The courts decided in this case that speech can be limited if the speech provokes a clear and present danger. When it comes to the military, when it comes to national defense, when it comes to the security of this nation, that's where we're going to find the biggest cramping of our civil rights or our civil liberties. The Patriot Act, which we'll talk about and we have talked about, takes away a lot of our liberties in trade for safety. And this is a great example of that. Things like being guaranteed due process. We don't violate these constitutional clauses unless we're in a dangerous situation. And this is an example. When World War I, when we're drafting people to fight in this war, if you're going to walk up and down the streets and oppose that, it's not going to fly. That's not going to be a protected thing that you have as a citizen, believe it or not. Okay, so get out of your way here. It is free speech to advocate a violent overthrow of government. Obviously not. You can walk up and down the streets and say, "I'd love to have a revolution. Let's fight. Let's take up arms." But technically, you're not protected under your constitutional rights. And then the other one, this is what we say when you're in like 3rd grade when we teach the 10th Amendments. You can't scream fire in a crowded theater. I think the official charge is inducing panic, but you can't say things that are going to cause danger to other people. And if you scream fire in an area or bomb in an airport, you're not protected by that. You are putting other people in danger. And our Constitution, wants to protect them also. So, but I think that can go without saying. All right. Free press and fair trials. I'm going to take a little break here, and I'll be back in 0 seconds for you, maybe 60 for me.
Is it true you were a crack cocaine dealer for 7 years? I plead the fifth.
Sir, will you tell us about the cartels you dealt with in your time as a crack cocaine dealer?
No, but I can tell you that I plead the fifth.
Exactly how much money did you earn in your time as a crack cocaine dealer?
There, I said there are so many amendments in the Constitution of the United States of America. I can only choose one. I can only choose one. Plead the fifth. Plead the fifth. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anything you say, fifth. Go ahead, ask me a question. You fifth. A secret document that I think you need to say.
Thank you all, sir. Good afternoon. I got your sentence reduced to a month.
Oh!
All right, oldie but a goodie. That's the Fifth Amendment. Go back here where we were. Matt versus Ohio. It had to do with the exclusionary rule. You guys can read about that in the textbook. But the Fifth Amendment means you don't have to incriminate yourself, meaning you do not have to testify against yourself. You do not have to be a witness against yourself. So when people plead the Fifth Amendment, it keeps them off the stand. They're putting themselves in a position where they may or may not make themselves sound bad. I think we talked about this a little bit already in class, but the Fifth Amendment is designed to protect the accused from making themselves look guilty when they maybe are not guilty. So, Patriot Act is what we're going to talk about in class tomorrow. How much freedom do we want to give up for liberty? After 9/11, things really changed. I think we talked about this a little bit, this year when 9/11 came around. But we gave up a lot of our freedoms. We gave up a lot of our liberty as Americans in trade for freedom. And was that right or wrong? Some would agree, some would disagree. But we'll worry about that. That's what, well, actually, you'll probably watch this tomorrow night. So that's what we did today. So reflect back on what we talked about today in class and move forward here. So the Fifth Amendment. All right. You have the right to Miranda versus Arizona. Here's the big one. Police officers must read your rights to protect you from self-incrimination. I love Cops. It's my favorite show. First reality TV show, I think. But you have a right to a lot of things, and that's what the Miranda rules are. So from watching Cops, maybe I don't know it. Uh-oh. Apparently I still left that video on. Give me a second here. Interesting. I don't know what's going on with that website. Okay, so anyways, this is our last slide, I believe. So we have Miranda versus Arizona. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one, one will be provided for you. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to anything you say or do will kind of be used against you in a court of law, blah, blah, blah. You've heard it all before. All that means is that the police officer has to make it clear to you that you have rights protected by the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And if you want to speak, you can, but the things that you say might incriminate you. So pretty much what they're telling you is you have that Fifth Amendment right to not say a thing. And a lawyer would always advise don't say anything until you're in the presence of a lawyer. You do not have to speak to a police officer for any reason without a lawyer present if you don't want to. But if you're innocent, then what's the worry? All right, so I got a weird-looking, dirty old guy on the screen here. Why is that? there's a case in the textbook about the dirty old man. So in 1954, this guy named Keith Jacobson, he's 56-year-old farmer, supported his elderly father in Nebraska, ordered 2 magazines from a brochure. He expected nude photographs of adult males, but instead got photographs of nude boys. Double wow. He ordered no other magazines. 3 months later, the federal law was changed to make the to get these things in the mail is illegal. 3 months later, after it already happened to him. So they found his name in a mailing list of California bookstore. 2 government agencies repeatedly enticed Jacobson through 5 fictitious organizations and a bogus pen pal with solicitations from sexually explicit photographs of children. Pen pal, I guess that's before instant messaging and things like that and social networking. So they pretty much tricked him into it, I guess. They knew he had been sent something accidentally, so they kept sending him things, trying to catch him. After 26 months of enticement, it's over 2 years, Jacobson finally ordered a magazine and was arrested for violating the Child Protection Act. He was convicted of receiving child pornography through the mail, which he undoubtedly did. Jacob claimed, however, that he had been entrapped into committing a crime. Entrapment would be, the usual example is maybe a cop sitting outside a bar. They're kind of setting you up for guilt, I guess. But the question is, was Jacobson an innocent victim of police entrapment, or was he a dirty old man seeking child pornography? What do we think happened? I don't know. Actually, I do know. Well, before we get to the Sixth Amendment, the court agreed with Jacobson in Jacobson versus United States. This is 1992, ruling that the government had overstepped the line between setting a trap for the innocent and the criminal, and failed to establish that Jacobson was independently predisposed to commit the crime. So they can't necessarily trick you into committing a crime or entice you to commit a crime. They call that entrapment. And if the courts agree with you, then you will be found innocent rather than guilty. Got it? Good. All right. Let's finish this up. Sixth Amendment. Right to counsel, right to confront witnesses, and the right to a speedy public trial. That kind of goes without being said. Counsel is, you have a right to a lawyer. You have a right to know who the witnesses are that are testifying against you and have the opportunity to confront them about it, in a controlled situation. And you have the right to a speedy public trial. If you, get put in jail for drunk driving, they can't say, all right, your trial's in 8 months, so you're just going to have to sit in jail until your trial. It has to be within reason. And Gideon versus Wainwright, 1963. Sorry, I keep making this wiggle. Everyone accused of a felony, regardless of how poor you are, has the right to a lawyer. So if you can't afford one, one will be provided for you. Obviously, a public defendant is what we would call those people. Public meaning they're paid for through public dollars. Some of you might be considering law. History, social studies is a great springboard for that. And public law is an option. And being a public defender, that's what you do. You defend people that can't afford to defend themselves or afford to pay a lawyer to defend them. And I think that's a very fair opportunity to constitutionally protect our defendants, people accused of a crime. Plea bargain. It's just a legal term. You plead guilty to a lesser crime, and the courts agree not to prosecute you any further. Some of you might experience your first plea bargain when you get your licenses, or maybe you already have. I'm trying to think, who can I pick on right now? Peggy, she drives that Pontiac. I don't know. She might be crazy out there. Let's say, Peggy, you get pulled over going 85 on 270. The speed limit's 65. You get a ticket for going 20 miles over the speed limit. You go to court. The judge says, hey, Peggy, will you agree to be guilty of going 70 in a 65? You say, sure, I'll plead guilty to that. You get a much smaller penalty. You save the court a lot of time and money. So they just give you the lesser penalty because you admitted guilt. On a bigger level, when we talk about like murder cases and things like that, generally if you admit guilt to a murder or whatever crime you committed, you're going to get a reduced penalty. You might not face the death penalty, or you might, it might not be as big of a deal. So a plea bargain is just you pleading guilty to a lesser crime, and the courts agree not to prosecute you any further. It's kind of an agreement that helps everybody, saves everybody time, everybody money, and the situation should be rectified at that point. Okay, Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. The courts have deemed that taking people's lives is not cruel and unusual punishment, so it's legal as long as it's done, some kind of humane way. Through the 14th Amendment, this rule applies to the states. Some states have the death penalty, some don't. Some have it, like New York, and never use it. Ohio, we use it, not very often. States like Texas, boom, they're just taking people out left and right. It's not that quick, but it's much faster than many other states. So Gregg versus Georgia ruled that the death penalty is not cruel and unusual punishment. Many would argue that it is. That could be something we could discuss in class, whether or not we believe that that is something that the government should have the right to do, regardless of an act you may have committed to take your life. That's about it. So that was my first attempt at teaching you through video. Hopefully it works out. We'll see. I'm open to criticism. Feel free to leave horrendous YouTube comments underneath this after you watch it, within reason. But I'll definitely be interested in your opinions on how this went. Probably won't always be this long. Obviously, I was kind of roll through it. Right now, I'm looking at the camera. Do you prefer me looking at the camera, or now I'm going to look down? Now I'm looking at me. Now I can see myself teaching. I'm going to watch this and see which looks more natural, but if you noticed, I've kept going back and forth, back and forth. Okay. But anyways, make sure you understand all these definitions. We're going to have a vocabulary quiz. I'll probably push that back to early next week. Just give us an opportunity to discuss this tomorrow. When you watch this, it'll be Thursday, so tomorrow will be Friday. So we'll probably look at a quiz on Monday. Maybe Tuesday. I don't like it with Monday quizzes. Okay, well, that's it.